Well, Brandon's been talking with a little bit, so we just go over Cedric. But just a kind of quick introduction on Brandon. Correct me if I'm wrong here. 3 times natural Mr. Olympia.
That's correct. Classic
Uh,
physique.
2 times world champion.
Yes.
And then what was the other one?
A
You missed
two-time Mr. Universe.
Mr. Universe, and you are currently under contract with Generation Iron,
I am.
and you're a writer for Iron Magazine.
I am, and I'm current writer. I've written just about an article in every most recent one, but the one that I'm actually on the cover of is the most recent one. And we're now doing a content creation schedule where we have a series coming out called The World's Strongest Everyman. So be sure to follow us on YouTube.
Okay.
And that basically is my intention to say, when you take a look at strength outliers, and this is kind of how this conversation in this article with Generation Iron began, was if you're a strength outlier, I'm only 5'5". On my best day in the off season, this morning I weighed in at 167.8, a whopping 167.8. But my total in terms of my certain lifts are 2-3 times my body weight. So my intention was to say, how much different, like you said, where there's guys, Cedric identified that were in the gym doing what they needed to do, and they are just about bodybuilders. How close, if you're a strength athlete and you're a strength outlier, even if I was in bodybuilding, would I need to be able to learn from the pros, and could I actually be able to scratch the surface of being in strongman? And then I was hoping they would pick up that article, but they picked up me on a podcast discussing the differences in terms of the general populace in social media thinking that they can just stare at somebody in the gym or something and say, hey, I know this guy is using, and it kind of spiraled into what it did. And I'll kind of sit back and let you guys.
Yeah, that was a older interview. It was actually back in December, right?
That's exactly right. And that's why
it was an older, and they brought it up. So
a lot of people were like, nobody asked this guy. And I'm like, yeah, they did. That was exactly what they asked me. So you didn't even listen to it. So that's why it kind of spiraled out of control. But
the whole controversy was your statement about you being able to pick out somebody that's natural and not natural.
So I'll even correct that. I never said, what I said was, social media is a cancer. And I'll say it again. Social media is the fucking worst. And the reason I say that is because I followed the Generation Iron articles that came out after that. And one of the articles was about a young girl, I believe she was 9, and she was able to lift like 3.6 times her body weight in a deadlift. The top 6 comments were, I believe it was like, this wasn't in an actual meet, it doesn't count. This is unhealthy for a young person to be lifting this much. Her growth plates are going to close too early. Another one was, wow, seems like she has a lot of rage. Her parents should look into that. And I'm like, this is a 9-year-old girl. And you had to scroll down to find one that was like a thumbs up and this is awesome. And that was around the bots. But it's like, what I had said was, most people, because I found myself on the Natty or Juice subreddit a bunch of times, and it's like, look at his vascularity. That's not possible if you're natural. And I'm looking at the phone like, what? And it really spiraled into this thought in my head where I'm like, most people have no idea what they're looking at. And the idea that as a regular gym goer, you could look at someone else's physique and go, that's impossible. Most people don't know that. And what I said was, even as a subject matter expert, I deal in percentages. So if you see a guy my size, 245, okay, there's a 99% chance that that's insane and not possible. They would study him as a human genetic freak to try and create super soldiers out of this guy, right? So you know that the odds of this person being natural is probably 0. But outside of that, there's percentage points. And the 2 that they picked up on was, if I see a guy who was watery and flat before the show and he just didn't look like he was going to be ready, but then all of a sudden he gains 15 pounds in fullness and looks super dry and striated and he's ready to compete. I said, okay, the percentage meter is going up a little bit. Then I said, but you have a guy who's been natural his whole life, and every offseason he puts on 1 pound of muscle, and then he's 32 and all of a sudden he puts on 20 pounds in less than 8 months. Well, the BS meter is kind of leaning toward 99% at this point. It was me saying most people have no idea what they're looking at, and their litmus test for, oh, he has this thing, his chest is so big, or he's so striated, or he has striated glutes. That doesn't happen in a natural guy. Look, I'm finishing my master's degree in human physiology, and that's not how that works. You can't just look at a photo. My favorite thing is people look at my photos and go, look at him, look how big he is. Big?
Mm-hmm.
Guys, I'm 5'5", and this morning I was less than 170, and that's deep in the off season. On stage in these photos they're looking at, I'm 150. Sean Clarita is 2 inches less than me and 100 pounds heavier in the off season. Wow. So the best part about that was when they announced that I was an athlete, right, Generation Iron, they came out and said, oh, here's this new athlete that we have that's natural. In the comment section, it was fake natty. This dude should just stop lying. What a piece of shit. I fucking hate these guys. And the best part was then they announced this thing and they were like, that's just because he won't, ever fit in an extra large t-shirt. He just doesn't understand what it's like to be that big and he should mind his business. And I'm like, so I'm a fake natty or I'm a real natty? Which one is it? And so, I didn't answer other than like one comment where I was like, this isn't what I said, but okay, I understand where you're coming from. And I will concede to Generation Iron. The clickbait article worked. My social media following went up 6% in like one day. I get it. It worked.
Yeah, it brought a lot of attention. I can tell you that.
Yeah. I'm on this podcast, which is great. Meeting some guys that are, big titans in the industry. I like talking to people like that. So believe me, I get it. I just don't really know when we're going to understand that one, the social media life of people in the comment section is usually pretty miserable, but two, photos don't tell the whole story. And that includes you guys in the IFBB, right? How many times have you seen the show come up and everybody goes, oh, this guy should have won. And of course the head judge is going to go, you weren't there. You didn't see it. That's not how that works. This is just a different flavor of it, really.
I want to kind of combine a comment with a question for you.
Sure.
So when Frost was gay, which you probably know, when he showed up at the Swiss scene, I mean, he was there before me when he competed with in the normal IFBB, not in the Natural Federation. So I would say 90% of us didn't believe a word he was saying, that he's natural. We came up with every excuse in the book, not knowing what we're looking at. So I remember when I saw him pumping up the first time, I was 16 years old. I was saying, well, his veins in his forehead are too big. Yeah. He can't be natural and all of that. Today, I know 99.9% certain, he's a very good friend of mine, he was natural all those years. What I always felt, and I want you to correct me, where it starts to really show if somebody's natural or not, especially you can answer that with your background in powerlifting and bodybuilding. Frostmas was never a strong athlete. Where people 1/3 his size in the gym were lifting way heavier weights. So I always felt like in the gym when I see a guy with hardly any muscles taking the 100-pound dumbbells out, the guy is not natural. Can you kind of go from this to that the strength really, but then you talk about people who can lift 3 times their body weight?
Yeah, I mean, listen, one of the things that you learn in terms of biomechanics is, leverage and lever size, and in terms of torque, conservation of angular momentum, in terms of the weight choices if you're doing strongman and, clean and presses and medleys and all that stuff, whatever. But what you're saying is 100% accurate, right? We take a look at guys like Ronnie Coleman, and we say, oh my God, look at what this dude was doing. There's guys now that look way worse than him that lift way heavier. He was just a guy that was a strength freak in the bodybuilding community. But you take a look at some of these other bodybuilders, and even Jay Cutler says it best, where he's like, sure, I do heavy. My favorite one is I actually go back to some of his stuff from like 93, 94 when he was releasing DVDs, training and stuff like that. And he always says, like, look, guys, I'm not counting reps. Sometimes I'll lift super heavy. Sometimes I won't. Kai Green's the same way, where he's like, I grow the most when I'm thinking about my mind-muscle connection. I think you're right 100% where it comes down to, listen, when you talk about steroids in terms of testosterone and testosterone derivatives, you're talking about trying to increase anabolic states and decrease catabolic states, increase testosterone ratios and decrease estrogen ratios, right? So essentially what you're doing is trying to do the most with the amount of amino acid and protein profiles you have, and do the most engagement on your muscle fibers, and then increase your recovery. So, I think you're 100% right in the sense where it's like, okay, if I were looking at a guy who was if I were in the gym and I saw Sean Clarita and he picked up the 60s and I picked up the 80s, I'd be like, I don't know why the fuck this guy's so big, man. Like I get it where you're coming from with that. But like you said, my favorite, I know I'm going to catch flack for this, but I don't care. There are certain groups of people on the planet that come from certain areas that are wiry and small, and for some reason they are just strong, man. And there are certain bodybuilding communities that work the same way, where we say to people, Generation Iron 4, I think, actually covered on this when they were going around the world, and there was a couple of guys who said, like, I've never seen thinner skin on X. I've never seen better calves on X. And sure, that's a bastardization of science, but until you really do the studies and figure out what the percentages and the ratios of those things are, you're 100% right. It's not about, hey, how heavy can you lift? How dry can you become? How quickly and how unrealistically can they get there, and to what unrealistic standard? And even then, like you said, you're still talking about percentage points. So the percentage of going to an IFBB Pro show and seeing somebody natural on stage who's going to win the whole show, very low, but it's not zero. It's not. So,
Who is the best natural athlete? Is it like a Mr. Olympia or Mr. Universe? Or
I love that you asked that question, because this is an issue that the IFBB never had to deal with, right? And actually they covered it in a couple of the movies where they talk about it, where they essentially say it's a dog eat dog world in the bodybuilding community, and there's so many different federations. And I've married mine. I think the INBA, our drug testing is the best. I'll just put it like this: there's no other federation that you can go to their website and who failed and for what. We're the only federation that does that. But that's just me plugging my federation. The other side of that is the OCB, the INBA, the NGA, the ANBF, the SNBF. There's so many of them that you're spreading some of the best athletes, where they'll find a theater and they'll find a market that they'll do best in to launch their career. And I'll be the first to say, if you have won the world championship in the NGA 6 times, or you have the AAU Mr. Universe 7 times, and your training spikes because of it, am I really going to join the OCB Yorton Cup and possibly lose? I don't know. I have done that, where I've competed in the NGA, got a pro card there. I competed in the INBF and was 2nd place overall there. I've done an NPC show. The INBA for me and the PNBA just had the better testing, and I liked how they treated their athletes, and so I've stuck with them. And I'm glad that I did.
Be nice to know for a young athlete, this is the number one.
I would argue, because again, it's my federation, and John will tell you the same thing. Mr. Natural Olympia to me is the guy. And if you really want to go for it, and people will say, well, why do you say that? Because we're the only federation that has so many countries that competitors are coming from. So we've had German competitors, Swiss competitors. I won my 2 universe titles in New Zealand and Australia. I didn't just fly to California, compete twice, and go, I'm 2-time Mr. Universe. And I did it against 6 guys from Southern California. So that's another thing, right? Is where are your athletes coming from?
You placed 2nd at the Mr. Olympia this year. Is that correct?
Yes, my 4th. I was trying to do my 3rd consecutive title defense. Yeah.
Is that an open category, or are they weight classes?
Oh, nope, open category.
So you are, in your opinion, the 2nd best natural bodybuilder in the world right now.
Right now, sure. I would argue by standards of the last 4 or 5 years that I'm the best natural classic physique guy. Sure.
That's great. That's great.
So if you're asking me where the best natural bodybuilders are, it's right here in the state of Connecticut. That's where I'm right here.
Good. I don't want to. I want to let the other guys in, but I wrote down a few questions. One I'm very, very curious about is, other than the obvious, when it comes to food, workout split, frequency, repetitions, what's the biggest difference between natural bodybuilding and non-natural athletes?
I will argue that most of the physiology and the nutrition to get there is relatively similar. I would argue that the difference is, if you get on stage and they tell you you're not big enough, if you think you're coming back within 2 years, you're out of your mind. I believe that I've seen IFBB pros go, listen, you got to gain 15 pounds or you're not going to break the top 3. And then by the next year at the same show, they can do that. There's no way. There's 0% chance. My first NPC show was in 2012 at the Orange County Muscle Classic. Fun fact, I believe it was Sadiq Hadzivic's 3rd pro win. I met him backstage. He was actually a really nice guy. And then I didn't compete again until 2014. And even then I didn't dial it in right. And then I didn't compete again for another full year. And then I gained about 0.7 to 1.2 pounds a year on stage since then. And that was from 2012 to 2020. So 10 years. So on stage weight to gain 10 pounds, it took me a decade. I would argue that that's the difference, is that a lot of natural guys are trying to compete and build a following and a career as much as some of the untested guys. And it's just never going to happen, because if what you were told is you were too small or you need to dial it in, competing more doesn't help with that. It muddies the waters, actually.
So is the training workout splits pretty much the same as we used to do?
Yeah, block periodization. I would say the difference between my training and other people's training is they're always going for standard hypertrophy, whereas I'm, like you said, I have a off-season powerlifting and strongman background, so I like lifting very heavy for my frame, because I have some great muscular development when it comes to lifting super heavy and getting that overload principle in, that I just don't think enough guys are willing to arguably risk, possibly blowing out their knee or blowing out a shoulder or tearing a pec or a bicep, doing something that isn't going to benefit them on the bodybuilding stage. But I would argue that it helped build a lot more denser muscle on my frame by doing a different sport in the off season, but not giving a shit what my body fat percentage was.
So in off season, if we would talk about, let's say, a back workout, how many sets would you do? How many are in what rep range there?
I'm a glutton for punishment, so my sets amount is usually pretty high. But I think the last block that I did before March was a standard limit strength. So I had a couple weeks where I was doing 5x5s, and then it went down to a couple rep ranges where I was doing heavy compounds for 5 to 3 reps. And then I wanted to find out what my limit strength was. So I went for a powerlifting peak to figure out what my 1 rep maxes were. And then all my accessories were about power. So I would do 8 reps, but it would be heavy explosive shoulder press or band work or, isometric holds. But I really didn't go over 8 reps until at the end. If I was bored, I would do a burnout or something like that. But I would very rarely go over 8 reps in the off season. It's about overload. It's about growth. Stop trying to look super shredded and maintain a V taper when what you want is more muscle. It's either gain muscle or stay shredded. You got to pick one.
How many times?
Go ahead, Phil.
Okay, how many times do you train each body part a week?
Legs twice. When I was trying to grow them, I did legs 2 to 3 times a week, but everything else once. Now it's everything once, and whatever I feel was lagging from the previous season, I'll hit that twice. But the second time I'm going to hit it, I'll always take a rest day first, and a rest day to me isn't, I went and played football. Like, no. The rest day is you do nothing. You eat, you recover, you sleep, don't do anything. So
how many days a week are you in the gym?
I like to stay 5. Sometimes if I'm having a rough week and I just need to work some aggravation out, I'll go 6, but that's very rare because I've got tendonitis in my left arm and it really flares up if I'm in there more than 5 days a week.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you think recovery time is important because you're natural? You think 5 days a week in the gym is too much?
I didn't until I hit my 30s, and now I'm in my mid-30s, and for the first year and a half, I'm like, I don't think fitness is about being in constant soreness all the time. So no, you're 100% right. And that's when I'll say to myself, okay, listen, my body's talking to me. I'm going to take a recovery block where all I'm going to do is just slow negatives to 10 reps or pick 5 exercises and just over the course of, let's say, an hour, try to get to 75 reps on each of them, just as nice and smooth, focused on mind muscle connection. So you're right. The younger I was, I felt invincible. As I'm getting older, I'm like, okay, I can't keep up this level of training, ferocity for long. So yeah, 100% right there.
Okay. Yeah. Good.
I got to ask you something real quick, Brandon.
Sure.
Let me pull it up here. Is your hair natural in this picture?
I knew it. I knew that was coming. It is, yeah. So the funniest thing was when I left the military, I told my wife 2 things. I wasn't getting any more haircuts, and I was growing my beard out. Well, now I had a beard my last 3 or 4 years in the military because I've really coarse hair and I get really bad ingrown hair. So I had a shaving waiver, which a lot of guys thought I was spec ops because I always had a beard. So I was in California once, and some guy got on the elevator with me and he goes, when are you headed back over? And I had already told, like, I'm like, I don't know, man. And I just like go. I was like, whatever. But my hair, I decided I wasn't going to get a haircut. And so from my first time that I got out of the military, I had a mohawk my first year, but I just kind of let it grow out. And then I just didn't cut my hair for like 3 years, and I kept winning. And then when they offered me the cover of Iron Man magazine, the COO and the president called me up and they said, hey, so what are you thinking about doing to your hair for the cover? And I was like, well, I'll probably like get it done and maybe put it in like a Viking thing. And they were like, no, I don't think you understand what we're asking you. What are you going to do with it? And I was like, oh, I guess I got to get a haircut, huh? And they were like, if you want to, it's okay if you want to. And I was like, I guess I'm getting a haircut. So, and then I lost the Olympia. So,
oh man. So it might've been the hair, huh?
It was my power hair, man. I was shredded jeans. What am I now?
I do want to ask, I want to go back to one of your controversial comments. You talked about somebody putting 20 pounds of muscle on in a year. Do you really think it's impossible for a natural person?
I guess what I would say in terms of the percentage that I was talking about before is that if you were my size and I came back 20 pounds heavier, I would think that was statistically impossible. But as we were talking right before and then during the beginning of the podcast, look, if you're 6'3", that's a very different ratio. Again, that's why we're talking about percentages. What I was simply saying was you have to take a look at all of the figures as a whole and decide what the probability is that this person is either telling you the truth or they're not. And even then, my favorite thing is other natural athletes will message me on Instagram, Facebook, and they'll send me a photo. And they'll go, do you think this person's natural? I always type the exact same thing back. It's none of our fucking business. I do not care at all. I don't dislike anyone for their career choices. And the IFBB and any other untested federation, Inspire Sports League, whatever, that's your choice. I love bodybuilding. And all these, Victor Martinez, by the way, love you, Victor. My family's Dominican. You've been one of our favorite bodybuilders forever. He commented where he was like, why don't you ask this guy to tell me, who's a lawyer and who's hooked on pills? And I was like, you're making my point. You're not arguing with me. What I was saying was that you can't look at someone and tell those things. And so I think what it really comes down to is natural bodybuilders are annoyed when we feel we're getting cheated. And so that's what it comes down to is a lot of natural bodybuilders are looking for a thermometer to go, he shouldn't be here. She shouldn't be here. You're not the natty police. There's no such thing. The only natty police is the urine in the cup. That's it. And so I think that's where this really starts to come to a head is people trying to identify cheaters before they get there. One, it's not going to happen. And two, I'm talking to whoever's listening, you're not going to be the guy. Don't try to be the guy. It's not going to be you. Because it's going to be nobody. I usually get in trouble, like you said, controversy, right? I get controversial with my own federation and natural bodybuilding too. Tests can be beaten, all of them. I get that. Ester length, what you're using, whatever. What we're saying, though, is that there is never going to be a test that everyone will go, I believe that. There just isn't. Because you can have a camera following you around, and the second it flickered, people would go, that was it. They edited it right there. That was it. And it's like, you didn't want to believe them. You never wanted to believe this was possible to begin with. You were waiting for the piece of evidence, the gotcha. And sometimes it's just easier for people to bridge the gotcha gap better than other people. And they just want to go, I had that guy. I knew it. I know that guy's a cheater. Okay. I've had guys come up to me at public events and go, you're a piece of shit, right? And I'm like, okay, good to meet you too. And then I've had my IFBB pro friends, shout out to Willie Dub. He came up to me and was like, huh. I said, what's that? He goes, thought you'd be bigger. And I went, it's good to meet you, man. So you're never going to make everybody happy. And I understand that the perception of public opinion is always going to sway against whoever is in the public eye saying adamantly, this is a fact. There's going to be some people that go, no, it's not. Okay.
Hey, if somebody who is on steroids wants to switch to natural bodybuilding, when will he be qualified?
That's a really good question. So that depends on the federation. Some federations say lifetime. That if and again, that's one of those things, right? The only lifetime you can say is I looked at this person's old photos and I know they were using. That doesn't work, right? So realistically, they're going to test you, and if your TE ratio is off, or let's say you were using something to keep the anabolic state high to try and maintain that muscle mass, they're probably still going to catch you. But realistically, there are some federations out there that are also a ban of just 7 years, that they believe that it takes about 6 to 7 years, and you can basically be a born again natty.
I mean, I studied the drug tests of your federation very closely. And I saw the 7-year mark there. What if a guy has naturally no testosterone?
Oh, so what you're talking about is what's called therapeutic exemption. The INBA, unless you have, like, let's say we've had guys who had cancer before. We've had guys who have had like their major organs removed that need to be using certain performance enhancing drugs. I don't want to misspeak. However, I've never seen the INBA give a therapeutic exemption for straight testosterone. Again, they will correct me if I'm wrong. I have seen therapeutic exemptions for things like fulosamide, which is a diuretic. I've seen for beta blockers, actually, and I'm going to say this out loud for anybody that's thinking they'll beat the test with this therapeutic exemption. Clenbuterol is not legal for use for asthma in the United States, so don't try. But I've seen that argument too, where it's like, well, I have asthma, so I have to take clenbuterol. They don't prescribe that in the United States, so no, you don't. But I have seen them do that.
Same, of course, with GH. I mean, we all know our levels decline.
Yes.
What about a body-owned hormone like insulin? Can you consider yourself natural if you use it?
So let's talk about the validity of the testing. Tests can be beaten. And if you think that you're going to find somebody, I will never name them. I've said this before on podcasts. I'm never going to name them. However, there's a very well-known natural bodybuilder that is probably one of the only people that has my meter almost all the way to 100. And I believe that that's what they're doing, because every couple of years they disappear for about 8 months. You could use GH and insulin back to back and come back.
I don't even talk about cheating. It's just like, I want to compete in natural bodybuilding. My early morning blood sugar numbers would show my pancreas not working. I can use insulin, or is that all in your protocol, in your testing protocol? You can't use it. And I talk about people who want to cheat. People who want to cheat will always cheat. You know, I talk about, is it okay?
I believe that it would come up in a drug test, and you would have to prove through therapeutic exemption with a prescription, this is why I'm taking it. So I believe insulin would be one of those that you could get a therapeutic exemption for. I believe.
What type of test do they use? What type of testing?
So we use a lot of other federations, because you said they. The OCB, the INBF, NGA, they all use polygraph testing, and then they'll use individual urine tests for pro card winners or whatever. We don't use polygraph because it's inadmissible in court. You can beat it. Why are we wasting our time? We're not going to waste your $30 by getting something out of the way that not only can be beaten, but has been shown to actually give you false positives. So our urine testing is done through a very specific WADA up compliant lab. I believe we have 2 to choose from, that we test just like the UFC, the WBA, whatever, down to the picogram level, which for those who don't know, if you took a grain of salt and you cut it into 1 million pieces, one of those 1 million pieces would be a picogram. So we test urine. We have double samples. I know because I'm a certified proctor. So when we have powerlifting meets and bodybuilding shows here, I do the urine testing in the state of Connecticut at Steel Beach Gym. So what winds up happening is you'll have a proctor go into the stall or to the bathroom with the urine tester. They will present a sample. We first need to test the actual temperature of the urine to make sure that it's fresh. It's split into 2 samples. The 2 samples are sealed over the actual tube in front of the member and signed. Then the bag is signed and sealed in front of the tester. It will be placed in a heat protectant transporting bag, essentially, and it goes to a WADA lab, and the WADA lab will test the A sample by itself. It's not a vat. It's by itself, which is not how law enforcement and military test. They test in a vat, and then they break it down after that. So we'll test the A sample. If you come up positive, we will notify you what you've tested positive for and to what levels. It's up to the athlete to decide if they will accept the suspension or the lifetime ban, or if they want to, on their own dime, test the B sample. And if they can prove with the batch number and producing a sample of a supplement that says it was inadvertent in terms of what we call inadvertent ingestion, then that will decide what to do after that. We have only, believe ever encountered that in the media, not in the INBA. I've only ever seen the actual people go, yes, this was inadvertent, twice. And one of them was Nick Diaz. And it was because his creatine supplement was being produced in China, and it was being produced in the same vat as, like, I believe it was Turinabol. And so the trace amounts of Turinabol wound up in his system, and he didn't receive any ban or any fines for that. We work the same way, where we're essentially going to test the A sample, tell you what you tested positive for, and give you the opportunity to either say, you caught me, or here's $1,000, I want the B sample tested. And let's just say in 30 years, 32 years, I believe now that the INBA has been running, nobody's ever beat our test and nobody's ever beat us in court. So
how long do you test before competition?
So we've done it in season and off season. I've been a promoter at a show that they were like, hey, can you come with me? And I've tested at the Natural Olympia in 2016 when I won the amateur for my division, and then was top 10 in the pro the next day. I was tested 3 times: when I arrived, when I won the amateur, and right after the pro results came out for the Saturday show. I've been tested since then, I believe 4 or 5 times. And it really does come down to, because everybody's going to say, well, why not every show? If you want the testing to be that specific, you have to be smart, right? If these tests cost $1,000 a piece and I show up just a little bit better than I was last year, are you really going to waste the $1,000 to try and test me again, or the guy who just came out of Germany and he weighs 285, right? So I've heard that argument before where it's like, well, you should test everybody. But those are the same people who are going to make the argument, well, it was too expensive to join the show. What do you think is paying for the drug tests? The entry fees. So again, I believe that there's this strange dichotomy within the sport of natural bodybuilding right now. Same thing with the pro cards, right? Everybody says the same thing. It's either the great natural pro card giveaway, or I did my work, I showed up to 3 separate shows, and there was never enough people competing against me, so they wouldn't give me a pro card. There's 50% of people unhappy with either way. So it's like you're never going to win. It's the same thing with the testing. I'm never going to be able to convince somebody that knows that every natural bodybuilder is lying. I understand that, right? I would just say to those who have that mentality of everyone is lying, you never even went to the show. You've never seen the person. You've never even clicked more than the one photo that you looked at. And you are a guy who or girl who's looking at this photo and saying, I've been working out as hard as that person and I've never looked like that. No, you're not. I guarantee you're not. There is $40,000 in gym equipment in my basement. I guarantee we don't work out the same, right? And so it really does come down to, like, when we'll go back to the drug testing, we're never going to convince everybody. But I believe that my federation currently has the best testing standards.
What do you actually test for?
I'm sorry, say that one more time.
What do you actually test for on the drug
So
test?
it's a specific panel where if you go to the WADA list, which is basically the same thing the Olympic Committee uses, we're testing for the S1, S2, masking agents, all of it. And I've seen the facilities. I've seen them do the testing because that's another thing you hear from a lot, which, by the way, big fan of the PCA. Like I said, I follow bodybuilding in general. I love you guys. It really does. It comes down to the rumors come around where it's like, I've been at shows where they take the urine and when everybody leaves, they throw it in the trash. I have to pay for the shipping every time I test people, and the results will come back with serial numbers and it'll show me the batch number. So we're literally testing for the exact same drug panel that they're testing for on the WADA banned substance list to the T.
How much is that test? How much does it cost to run that test?
Last I checked, it was a little over $1,000 per vial. So at any given show, you're talking about $10,000 in just drug testing fees, because you got to test at least 8 to 10 people, right? I mean, at my show, when there's only, let's say 40 competitors in a smaller show, I still do 8 drug tests. So it's not cheap.
How does that reflect on the entry fees? I mean, how much do you charge for an entry fee, and how do you get your revenue to cover that cost?
Yeah, so this is the smart thing that I believe that the INBA has done, and also why I believe that there are people who could say, well, that's not fair, but I don't believe that that would be the case, is we take a drug testing fee from every competitor from every show. That doesn't mean you're going to get drug tested. It goes into a pool, and that pool is made so that we can run the tests on the other 8 guys and keep a lawyer on retainer for when they go, that's a lie, you're besmirching my name, you put me on this website, and that's not true. We go, cool, you want to go to court? And I believe over the last couple of years, 1 or 2 people have. They sign a contract that essentially says, I know what's in the WADA banned substance list, and if I test positive for it, they can publish my picture and what I tested positive for and when. And the judge basically looks at it and goes, I don't understand why you would want to fight this. It's exactly what it says it is. The lab is accredited. You lose. So,
Ian, Ian, I will tell you, before I had lunch with Ross was a few years back, he sent me the list of drugs they test for. And I'm telling you, they were thinking of everything. I mean, that's just...
I know the Olympic test is literally everything. I mean, it's not... You can't even use a lot of supplements, can you, Brandon? There's a lot of...
Yes, so essentially, there were, I believe, in the last 3 years, we've had 4 over-the-counter just stimulants in terms of DMHA, DMAA, DMBA, area generis, which is what they use to replace it. It's all no-go, right? Whether or not I believe that stimulants are really going to give you that much of an edge that it should be worth it to test for, it's not my place to say. But what I will say is that, yeah, we've had people test positive for it and get a 1-year ban, which I will say is I'm happy they measured it like that, right? Because you'd hate to have somebody... I had a female at my show. If you want to see who she was, you can go on the Hall of Shame on naturalbodybuilding.com. She tested positive for like Clen and Anavar and a bunch of other stuff. And then we had 2 shows later, somebody tested positive for DMHA because it was in their pre-workout that they shot backstage. I've been at the Olympia, which is no issue on the sponsors. They might not have known any better, but they would make supplement bags for the competitors. And I looked through my supplement bag because I own a line of supplement stores and I have my own line of specific supplements. And I went up to the Keikos family and was like, you have to tell everybody not to take this. This is banned. If anyone takes this right now backstage, they're all going to pop positive. And so we went out on the Team USA page and then the day of on the microphone and said, listen, do not take this one. It was accidentally put in there. Don't take it. You'll test positive for stimulants. And so you're absolutely right. And in terms of the Olympic testing, or what we call on the other side for student athletes, Division I testing, if you originally had too much caffeine in your system, caffeine has been on the watch list of the WADA for like 30 years. And it's like, guy, you're not going to be able to, that's never going to happen. Just let that go.
Let me ask you, how do you select the athletes that you're going to test? How does that work?
Well, so that's so normally, let's say you're at a world championship and the division for classic physique was 1830 people. You know, the guy who wins that is going to get tested because they need to make sure the validity of the prize pot. At the Olympia, the largest division last year was, I believe they actually added to it, so it was $12,000. To some people, that's not a lot of money, but if you ask, and I have a lot of IFBB pro friends. Most of them lose money when they compete because with the federation fees and the cards and all that stuff, a lot of them lose money. Absolutely. So when people say that shit to me, I'm like, do you not understand that most people don't make money in this sport? That's not what it's about.
I'll tell you something. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I'll tell you something funny. Most athletes, if you're not sponsored and you go to a show, you're upside down. You spend more money than you're going to make.
I've tried to, so earlier when I talked about that guy who is trying to decide if he wants to move over to the untested divisions or not, I've said that to him where he was like, well, Brandon, how do you expect me to make my living doing bodybuilding? And I said, I want to be very clear here. John Meadows, I trained with him a couple times before he passed away, and he used to come down to my supplement stores and work his granite table all the time. And he literally would talk to us and be like, listen, I don't make money competing. I make money from my supplement company and from teaching and my YouTube monetization. Kids don't know that, right? They look at guys like Phil Heath or Ronnie Coleman who goes, I bought my first house with my Olympia money, and they go, well, I want a house. I should win the Olympia. That's not how this works. And I'll be the first to tell everybody. The only reason this check is on the wall behind me is because it's the first one I ever got. It's $1,500, right? I reinvested it into my business. I make money because these championships and when I compete, my business spikes. I don't make the money on the stage, but to make the argument that $15,000 or $12,000 is not a lot of money, okay, you could pay me then. I'll compete for you, and you could give it to me. right? So that's the first one, is if there's a large prize pot, that guy's going to get tested. The other thing is, like I said, if we're looking for year to year and all of a sudden, the guy goes from 9th place, 8th place, 10th place, and then all of a sudden he wins the world, wins the universe, wins nationals, and then wins the Olympia, 10 pounds heavier than he was last year, we're going to test him. And then there's judges' calls too, especially at the Olympia when the prize pot's a lot bigger. It's judges where essentially they have these red tickets and they'll say, he might not have won, but lean mass index looks a little bit suspect. And if it comes back clean, I'll pat him on the back and go, you did a great job. But that doesn't mean that you're just free of suspicion because you didn't win. So that would be the top 3 ways that people get tested at the shows. And then off season, like I said, usually your major pros, you're going to test them if you see them.
Who's the governing body for the Natural Olympia? Is it the INBA? The
INBA, PNBA, the Keikos family has maintained their ownership and their running of the Natural Olympia in Las Vegas the entire time it's been around. They also, obviously, I believe the first one was in Greece on Mount, on the Olympiad. But every other time they tried to keep it in that same vein as the IFBB, make it a big destination thing. And it always has been. It's always a great show and everybody has a fantastic time. And even the people who are in the crowd are always like, man, I didn't think the show was this big, 400 or 500 competitors over two days. So anybody that's looking to really see what it's about, last year and the year before was at the Golden Nugget. Every year before that was at the Rio. But it didn't reopen after COVID, so we couldn't actually get back in the Rio. Personally, I like the Golden Nugget a little better, but that's just me. So if you guys really want to see what it's about, message me on Instagram. I'll see if I can get you a ticket, because I really don't know how many people have actually been to a natural show of that size and can see how close the actual divisions and the bodies within the divisions are, and how realistic they are. Like I said, if I put on an extra large sweater, everyone would be like, the normal guy over there.
Yeah.
And that's any day of the year. But you see it on stage when it's really polished and it just looks very different. And I understand people's skepticism, but I don't understand the vitriol and the negativity that comes along with that. But that's the social media age for you, I guess.
Yeah. John, do you go to that every year?
No, I haven't been to it in the last few years.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't know if you'd go on that.
Were you there? Were you there in 2016?
2016, no.
I was going to say that was the first year that I was there, so we may have actually crossed paths.
Okay. Where was it in 2016? Vegas?
Every year before the last 2 years, it was at the Rio, the Rio All Suites in Las Vegas, Nevada.
So how do they do with the Olympia name? Does IFBB own that?
I asked about that. So I'm going to take this opportunity to tell you this is a story that the president and founder, Denny Keikos, told me over dinner when I asked him the same question. He was good friends with the IFBB pro heads back in the day. He ran the first ever natural NPC show because he tried to convince basically Joe Weider and essentially what would become Jim Mannion and this entire federation. There is a sport here in natural bodybuilding, right? It's here. The money, the monetization, it's there. He did this show and it was a smashing success, but they still said this just isn't what we're looking for. It wasn't, the freak factor. It wasn't a big draw for the crowd. It was only a big draw for athletes. And what we're looking for is a spectacle. And so he essentially asked them for specific rights to certain things, and Natural Olympia is not Mr. Olympia. And so while they basically said, like, you're free to go, don't worry about it. There's never been like a major butting heads or a lawsuit issue between the IFBB and the INBA, PNBA. We do own the rights to the words Natural Olympia, which has become a problem with other natural federations in the past, but not the IFBB. It's never been a problem.
Oh, okay. That's curious about that.
Yeah.
Do you have a lot of athletes coming from Asia? Because I know that.
Yeah, we most recently, I actually won the Asia Pacific back. In fact, I believe that's what that's from. Back in 2017, that was in Seoul, Korea. That was one of the biggest shows that I'd ever been to actually overseas. And so the federation head that was appointed for the Asian theater was unappointed after some stuff happened. And then we actually have one of our Natural Olympia champions who was reappointed. And so we actually do have a very established area within Asia where usually, I don't want to say Asia because they usually just compete as Team Korea, but we've had people come from, and India as well. I apologize because I know that's within Asia. So we have a Team India and a Team South Korea. But we have had Japanese athletes come through. It really does depend on whether or not they have a home and they're from there, or if they are of that descent and have emigrated to the United States, because we usually will say if your home address is in the United States, you can compete with Team USA.
The reason I ask is because the PCA is huge in South Korea. We've got like 50, 60 shows, but they're actually running a natural PCA federation along with the PCA. And every weekend when they do an untested show, they do a tested show too. So they have the natural show on a Saturday and they have the regular show on a Sunday.
I actually did not know that. I think that's really cool. It's kind of one of the reasons why I hope that the INBA, and now with this series that we're doing with Ironman moving forward, I would like to see not just the same sport, but I would like to see different sports as like a big, festival weekend like that, where it's like, I'm here to celebrate what I love in terms of fitness and the ability of, human perseverance in terms of what they feel is able to be done with their physiques, whether it be strength or bodybuilding. And I don't think there's enough of that right now that is going to be able to build into this thing when every natural federation, PCA included, is like, well, we've cemented our thing. This is PCA South Korea. We're not looking to interact with anybody else. I think that until that changes, it's definitely some muddied waters with some sharks in there, because everybody wants their piece, and rightfully so. I know bodybuilding is a business, hence why our earlier discussion on whether or not things are going to change within bodybuilding is very small. People vote with their dollar, and if you're still voting, why would I change anything? It's clearly working, right? Scandals don't always change anything until people go, I'm no longer going to support you until X, Y, Z. And I think that until something like that happens, the unfortunate part about natural bodybuilding, and I believe it was King Kamali said it, where he goes, and Joey Swole too, where they were like, natural bodybuilders, who are they? I don't know who they are. Unfortunately, that's a problem because there's just too many federations out there. And I hope that one day, my thought process is we can all come together and say, listen, OCB, you have a great market in the South, but the INBA basically runs California, Nevada, and New Mexico. So why don't we have, different variations in terms of where we come together and do shows that cross promote? I don't know. I would love for them to reach out to Denny Kakos and say, hey, INBA, PNBA, your testing standards are elite, and we would love to kind of implement the same thing, and let's all work together, Mr. America and the NGA and OCB. I don't know how thoughtful or faithful I am.
Would it not be great to have like a Mr. Universe from all those different federations going to one Mr. Olympia? Yeah?
That's exactly what should happen. That's exactly what
I will say this. My friend Mark Torriello runs the Mr. America in New Jersey. He purposefully did not sanction the show for that specific reason. And I know that originally the IPE was also supposed to be that, where they essentially were like, we only have 5 shows a year and we want everybody from all federations. However, as those federations grow, with the exception of the Mr. America, allegiances are set and people kind of hone in on their own, judging body and what people like in terms of judging criteria, how the show is run, production quality, and they will filter that way. So again, the only show that I know that is run like that, I will give a shout out to Mark Torriello from Extreme Gym in New Jersey, is the Mr. America show, because it was written in the contract that they're not allowed to sanction it with a single bodybuilding federation.
Let me ask you this. The AAU's back, right? With the Mr. America.
Yes. Well, no, not with Mr. America. Not with Mr. America. It's not called the Mr. America contest is unsanctioned. The AAU may have Mr. America, but the name Mr. America is sanctioned by Mark Torriello in New Jersey, and it is unsanctioned. By the way, Martin Drake, nice guy. AAU, nothing against them, but no, that is not the Mr. America show. The Mr. America show is not sanctioned by the AAU.
Oh, wow.
I thought it was.
Well, years ago, they had a court issue with the NPC. They lost, the NPC lost the Mr. America title. They couldn't use it. So the AAU grandfathered and won in court because they had the name prior to the NPC or the IFBB.
So I believe that the family who started the Mr. America owned the rights. And I believe that that argument was at the time that they were aligned with the AAU. And the AAU and the INBA used to work closely together too, where the AAU would run the strength events and the INBA would run the bodybuilding events in the 90s. That has since gone by the wayside, and now they're two independent governing bodies of fitness. And but no, I know I've competed in the Mr. America when it was unsanctioned just 2 years ago. As far as I know, unless it's changed in the last 3 weeks, it is still an unsanctioned show that welcomes all federations.
Wow.
Micah Hearn's involved with that, isn't it? Isn't Micah Hearn involved with the Mr. America?
So Michael Hearn is a very good friend of Denny Kakos, who runs the INBA PNBA. They've been friends for years. His first bodybuilding wins were INBA shows in the early 90s. And so I believe Mark reached out to him and said, hey, could you come speak? Could we have you do a guest pose? So yeah, the affiliation is there in terms of loose affiliation, but it's not like he's an investor and he owns 10% of it or anything like that. I just know that he was there or was invited.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I had I guess you would call it a podcast. It was back in 2008, 2009. It was called Natural Bodybuilding Radio. And we would do interviews with all the top natural bodybuilding winners. We went to all the different federations, and we were trying to get all the heads of all the different organizations together to create one organization. So like you were saying, JP, to get one organization, have one Natural Olympia, one World Championships. And we could not get everybody together to agree. They all wanted to do their own thing. And that was what, 13 years ago, 12 years ago. I mean, it was a long time ago.
I mean, you could still see the allegiances too, right? Like if you look at the winners of certain federations, you could tell their judging criterias are different. I mean, you take a look at bodybuilding markets even, and you can tell that somebody who wins in California and somebody who wins in Idaho, the judges are looking for something different. And I also think that that's going to be a major problem with natural bodybuilding moving forward, is that until you standardize the judging criteria, look, Steve Weinberger is going to be at every major pro title show. He's the head judge. If he says it's not good, it's not like you're going to come back with the same body and he'll go, now it's good. It doesn't work that way. And I think that until natural bodybuilding really globs onto that and says, listen, there's issues here in terms of things not adding up, where this guy is super shredded and he wins every show, but you had a guy who was a little bit bigger and just a little bit less shredded. That looks like a better bodybuilder to me. And then there are certain federations, I would argue the NPC leans this way, where if you're one of the biggest guys on stage, you've got a shot at top 3 no matter what. You could be 4 weeks out, and if you're the biggest guy, you're probably going to win. And
I can see, there's a lot of problems to overcome, but in a sense, in a way, if there would be one like Mr. Olympia, the federations would still compete against each other in a way. Every federation wants to bring that best bodybuilder, although they go later maybe back to their own federation, to their own thing. I think it would be a great thing where you can even get somewhat bragging right. Our federation has the Mr. Olympia right now, and I think in a way of marketing, people would know a lot more about bodybuilding, natural bodybuilding, if we would know this is the best in the world.
Then let me be the ambassador here. To all other natural federations, we would love to work with you. We want your federation to produce the next Mr. Natural Olympia. All you got to do is give us a call. So hopefully somebody's watching,
Good luck with that.
Yeah.
Thanks, John.
Right.
I mean, I was trying to do it like 12, 13 years ago. It's like everybody wants to do their own thing, and they just didn't want to work together.
Yeah.
I think it's actually, interestingly enough, is sort of what, John was saying, is it comes down to, I want to be the federation that runs the show. Right. I want to be the guy. And then
you got the financial thing too. I mean, if somebody's running an organization, they're the ones that are collecting all the money. So if you got 5 different organizations and now they're all going to be one, who's the one collecting the money? How are you going to split that up? So
There you
there's
go.
a financial consideration as well.
Maybe the federation have to give up that one show to an independent promoter. I mean, I know it will never happen. Just streaming, this.
Well, really, it could come down to this. Listen, if the INBA puts the show on, right? Well, I had to pay for the venue, I had to pay for this, I had to pay for that. After expenses, because we planned it, we keep X percentage of whatever's left over in the registration pot, and then everybody else cuts an even percentage off whatever's left. And again, I want to go on record. I have no stake in the INBA.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a way to do it.
So yeah,
you got to get, and then everybody has different rules for every federation. So you just got to get everybody to agree. And like I said, I was pushing for this, 12 years ago, and we were having these people who are running the different organizations on my show, and we were interviewing them, and we just couldn't get them all in one room, so to speak, to do it.
Quite literally. I remember 4 or 5 years ago, Denny tried to do it again. And there were just people that were like, if so-and-so's there, I'm not coming. And then there were some guys that were like, I have no interest in talking to other federation heads. So it's like, all right, well, I guess that's that then.
And I'm sure, Phil, you remember back in the old days of bodybuilding when you had the AAU, the IFBB, the WBBG, NABA,
Yes.
you had all these different organizations, and everybody was fighting everybody.
Yeah.
Kind of reminiscent. But I think natural bodybuilding would be much bigger if they all would get together and just do one organization, but it's just getting everybody to agree.
Yeah.
Back in the day, you had a lot of IFBB guys going over to the NABA and competing in the NABA universe. And then
that's what Lee Priest did, right? Lee Priest had a lot of NABA trophies.
Lee Priest is running NABA in Australia now.
Mm-hmm.
I know.
Because I know
friends with Eddie Elwood, who runs NABA, the NABA HQ in the UK and international.
Yeah.
But like Arnold used to come over, and Bill Pearl and all those guys would
it was huge.
NABA universe and compete. And then Joe Weider stopped all that.
Yeah.
And that's when it all started. Joe Weider stopped it. He threatened all the IFBB guys. In fact, I think Eddie Elwood printed the letter from Joe Weider only a few months ago that he sent to NABA, or he sent to Arnold, telling him he could not compete in NABA anymore. And that's when it all started. That's when all this started. And it's sad. It's sad because, it's all the same sport.
Well, you'd be suspended. Weider would suspend you. The IFBB would suspend you if you were to compete in NABA. So,
And
well, that's what happened to Lee, right? Lee got suspended for that.
Yeah, but I don't even know if it was NABA. But I came up through the NABA ranks. I won the junior NABA Mr. Universe, and then I got my pro card the year after Dorian did. And I'm convinced that myself, Charles Claremont, Thierry Pastel, a lot of those guys were penalised because they used to be NABA guys. You were looked down upon,
of course,
you were judged lower than you probably should have been because you didn't start your career with the NPC or the IFBB.
Absolutely, they did that.
Would it not be great if back in the days, Jeff King or Charlie Claremont during his best years would have the opportunity to compete at Olympia and then go back to wherever they want to? But
that's how it should be.
Away.
Yeah. That's how it should be.
It should
really
be.
Should.
Yeah.
Jeff King never got a chance to come over to the IFBB.
No, he had to go to the NPC and start over again.
Well, I did an interview with Jeff, and he said he had it worked out with Wayne D'Amelio where he was going to do the Night of the Champions one year, and he was training for it, and he looked great. And then he said, like 2 weeks before the show, it was just they canceled it. They said, no, you can't do it.
You remember Mike Quinn? He won the universe.
Yeah, and then he came back to the NPC.
Came back to the NPC, had to win the USA Championships, then get a pro card.
Yeah.
So they wanted you to start all over again. It's like that didn't count.
Yeah, because of a different organization.
Yeah.
Well, I will say that there is one thing that's different nowadays about that, and I will say that I've spoken to Denny at length about this, where it's we honor other federation pro cards. If you are an NGA pro or a WNBF pro or whatever, as long as you hold the card, you'll still need to purchase our dues, where it's like, hey, listen, if you're going to compete in our federation, you got to pay your dues so that we can put it in the prize pot. We've never banned even federations that have been like the INBA is a joke. Fuck these guys. We've never banned any pro from competing with us. And so I would say, listen, if you don't want to, if you hear these and go, that's a horror story, That won't happen to you when you come to compete with us at the PNBA. I've never seen it. I've never seen anyone turned away, and I've seen multiple people from other federations win major titles and win major money and go back. Some of them choose not to, and some of them go, well, look, just because I won the money doesn't mean that I'm not friends with XYZ. I'm still going to go back. But I would argue too that what we're really talking about, all of us talking about, that these problems have existed long before this debate started, right?
Yes.
What we're talking about then is the fallacy of people who want to be the one at the top who collects the money and controls everything as it relates to bodybuilding. And unfortunately, that's a human error. And that's the same thing as it relates to kind of bringing this all back together in terms of, performance enhancing drug use. It's like, look, if there is a calculated payout that's going to make this risk worth it, someone's going to do it, even if it's cheating. If the cheat is I could be banned for life and everyone's going to know I cheated. But if I do it and I do these 3 shows, I could pocket 50 grand. Someone's going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really think that that's really what this argument is about, is that the unfortunate thing about having people run these things is that no one's ever going to think with an unbiased mind. It's always going to be, this is a business, and we all know that it's $1 billion business at this point, which is still my favorite thing, that people call bodybuilding a niche sport, right? I could go to any supermarket on the planet and get a bodybuilding magazine. I could go to any YouTube channel and they'll go, oh yeah, I know who Mr. Olympia is. Like, it's ridiculous. It's not niche, okay? It's misunderstood, but it's not niche anymore. But we really do think that it is that it's one sport, there's one guy, and there's one way to the top. And we're all admitting that most of that way to the top is not a way to get rich quick scheme. It's mostly a go broke quick. It's a pyramid scheme. Let's call it that. It's a basic pyramid scheme.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But no, it really is a go broke quick scheme. And I think that the unfortunate thing about the IFBB and the NPC right now, with the last 2 years and all these deaths, I mean, George Peterson dies, a week before he's supposed to, 4 days before he's supposed to step on stage.
Mm-hmm.
And, Dallas McCarver being 23 years old when he dies. That pyramid's going to tip, where a lot of people are going to go, this is no longer worth it. Yeah, 400 grand sounds great, but I know 400 IFBB pros and no one's been on the Olympia stage of them. So the odds that I'm going to touch that is 0.
Mm-hmm.
What happens when those registration cards stop coming in? What happens when the mom doesn't want, I mean, look, youth football is the same argument, right? They're having a problem filling these youth football teams because parents are afraid that their kid is going to get a brain injury. How long before parents go, I don't want my kid interested in bodybuilding? I don't believe that this bodybuilder is a hero to my kid, because they're essentially enticing them into this idea that your health is worth the risk. And, it can make you very wealthy and it can make you very successful. And we're now realizing that the cost is not every 1% of bodybuilders is probably going to get injured, but that if you want to be the best, you're exponentially increasing your risk of something terrible happening to you a lot earlier in your life.
And at least other federations like football, or I touched on Formula One, they're making some changes. We seem to be the only one who are just oblivion to it and do absolutely no changes whatsoever.
Do you think, and I'll ask you guys this, because look, I'm on the podcast, but I got questions too. What is the possibility that the reason they're doing that is because the IFBB would then have to admit that they're basically predicating on the idea that there's a 99% chance that you have to use an illegal in the United States and illegal to transport from other countries where all these people are coming from, that how you get into this sport is you have to use an illegal substance. There's maybe, a dozen countries in the world that you can get it for free from a pharmacy, but that most of the places that the shows take place in terms of, Japan and Korea and America and Germany and Finland, it's illegal to use the things that you actually need to win. Mm-hmm. So I think that there's that they're really afraid to come out and go, yes, we understand basically every card carrying IFBB pro is breaking the law, but that's kind of just part of this.
Absolutely afraid. I remember when we had the discussion with Mr. Mannion about bringing the show to Switzerland. He was very, very concerned about athletes being arrested at the airport. So like it could happen in Belgium or in Norway. So we could tell him that this will not happen in Switzerland. But yes, they're absolutely afraid. So, but we all know IFBB Pro on top level. I think 90% of the people know when they look at those guys, well, something is not right here when it comes to performance-enhancing drugs. And afraid or not, they're going to have to do something with people who win a pro card. There's just at some point no way around it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually surprised that the IFBB doesn't use a lot more of their money to lobby that this should be, if TRT is a thing, then you shouldn't just, and we all agree that the low and high levels of what were considered normal testosterone levels is a little bit, gray area at this point. But then what are we doing here? These are consenting. If I could go to my doctor and say I'm having pain problems, and up until essentially a couple months ago, they would give you legal heroin. But if I want to use TRT or I want to, be an IFBB pro, I'm breaking the law to do it. I've always been surprised that the IFBB wasn't paying a lobbyist to go. At this point, the only thing that's safe is to make sure that our guys are using our doctors. And if you want to be the best, then you've got to do it safely. Like, I don't know why they don't use more money to do that.
I do. I know exactly why, because they want to keep the money for themselves. I mean, the very bottom line with bodybuilding nowadays, in my opinion, and why I was attracted to the PCA, is that look at the cost of an athlete competing nowadays.
Yeah.
They're trying to get them to do crossovers. Their entry fees are what, hundreds and hundreds of dollars. And then you've got your yearly membership fee. And I mean, some of these athletes are paying well over $1,000 to walk on a stage with the chance of getting it back virtually zero.
Yeah.
And fines if you don't stay in the host hotel or use the host tanner.
Think about the bikini girl in California. She will do on her first show, the true novice, the novice, the open, the hair, the makeup, the bikini, and then she has to use the tanning service with one promoter of the show.
Yeah,
$1,000 is not going to cut it,
But you get an $8 trophy at the end, so
yeah,
the trophy is cut in half.
Yeah.
Ryan Alexander, the founder of the PCA, he did like a video years ago that kind of drew me in. And one of the statements on that video was, there's a misconception in the sport, in the bodybuilding world, that there is no money in bodybuilding, but that only applies if you're an athlete.
That's a good one.
It's true. The NPC specifically, in my opinion, look at the pro status thing. The pro status, I don't know what it is, but it's a good few $100s, and they're producing thousands new pros each year, multiple thousands, and it's just a residual income. Absolutely. So why would they rock the boat if they're banking that much money? Why would they rock the boat? Because they really don't.
Ian, how many pros do you have in the federation?
How many pros do we have?
Yeah.
Worldwide, I couldn't give you a number worldwide, but we probably don't even have 500 worldwide, because that's and when you turn pro with us, there is no yearly fee. You don't pay you've earned the right to be a pro. You don't have to pay a yearly fee. It's one of my pet peeves. And
what if your federation is the first one with help from some sponsors, is doing the echograms, the stress test, and the 3-part test we were talking about here before? What if you guys are the first, or try to make it happen?
Yeah, Ian, you mentioned about that. You were talking about that.
Yeah, I know. I absolutely would. I mean, that's why I'm fascinated. That's why I asked the question I asked you, Brandon. How much is your drug test? How do you generate the income for it? How do you do it? And I love the way you do it. You charge everybody a fee, a testing fee. But it's just, to me, it's about making the sport more affordable, because it's not, let's face it, bodybuilding is not a rich man's sport. It's a working class sport.
No,
it's the working man. It's your blue collar guy that goes to work, comes home, and wants to build, wants to be the best physically that he can be. And that, to me, is what bodybuilding is. With all classes, bikini, men's physique, it's still a working class sport. And I think it's been turned into a rich man's sport, almost like a class thing, you know.
Yeah.
I don't like that. I think it should be affordable, but obviously enough revenue has to be generated to do these type of tests and do these type of things. But I think a lot of it starts with whether it's natural or untested, like we are at the moment. It is rewarding the physiques that are not just the biggest, freakiest monsters, because that's when you reward that. Then I remember when I was a pro, that's what we were chasing. We were chasing Dorian because Dorian was being rewarded as Mr. Olympia. So we chased that look because we wanted to win. Sure. And that's, to me, that's the fault of the organization for not seeing which direction they went and not correcting it, not bringing it back.
You want to talk about people who don't believe, right? Dorian Yates said that most recently, where he was like, after I retired, I came out in muscular development and gave them my drug protocols. And everybody said, if you didn't want to tell us, you didn't have to lie. And he goes, I wasn't lying. I'm telling you that's what I did. And if you do more than this, you're going to die. And that's why he literally backed off, where he was like, I did very small, I don't want to say small, but reasonable amounts of things that were dangerous to my physique. But it also was because I was in a dark place and I was, channeling this thing to make this temple of taking this horrible thing that I was feeling inside and trying to sculpt it into something better. Yeah. But the fact that you guys don't understand that my genetic potential was already there to be this, and this just took it to the next level. If you're trying to bridge the gap to start looking like I looked like when I was a teenager, this isn't for you. And everybody called him a liar. Yeah. It was the same thing back then, is that people look at something that someone does as unreal and goes, how did you do it? I did it like this. That seems too much like Occam's razor. That's bullshit. You're a liar. Okay, then why did you ask me? What did you want me to say to you? That I literally took double needles and jammed them in both my legs and was like, I'm going to be Mr. Olympia. Fuck yeah. That's not how it works. But that really is what people think, is that I have to be a bodybuilder and this vial is what makes me acceptable.
Exact same thing. When I used to do seminars at gyms all over the world, in Australia, America, all over Europe, and they would ask me how I used the PEDs, and I would tell them exactly what I did, and I would literally hear the guys walking out, he's full of shit, I'm going to double that, I'm going to triple that. I'd be like, what? You can't even. So I can relate completely to that. Yeah, I did, and like you say, to me, there's use and abuse. You've got abuse, and a lot of people do abuse things, and then you've got use, and that, to me, that's the difference. And I have nothing but respect for natural bodybuilders. I think it takes an amazing amount of discipline to seek to be bigger and better physically, and not take the red pill, so to speak.
Well, look at
that's a lot of discipline.
Ian, look at wrestling. Vince McMahon kind of got it down pat. Remember all those wrestlers that were dying and stuff?
Oh, yeah.
And if you watch wrestling now, you'll see a few freaks, but overall, he's going natural. Yeah. He's going natural. He's gotten strict on it.
No, one thing the magazines never did over the years talked about genetic factors. This was the program, you work out like this and you look like that, but they never talked about genetics. So a lot of people, young people coming up, they don't even know what genetics really are.
No.
They don't know if you have good genetic potential, bad genetic potential, if your genetics to be a runner or one to be a strong man or one to be a bodybuilder. That's
at my bodybuilding seminars. That's the number one question. What do you guys mean when you say genetics? And I'm like, okay, let's start from square one.
Yeah.
And what I want to bring up more in the future is on my social media platform is another big issue is when you retire and what you do when you retire. I think that was, for example, Nasser's downfall. So I don't know how much Nasser took and thing, and we can all now say, look, what Dorian did, he's open about it, is not as bad as others do, but it could kill you what Dorian did, it could kill you what Jay Cutler did, but look how Dorian reacted after he was done. I mean, he lost the size. His endurance is great. He is on the bike every day. He's small. Where Nasser never got small.
Well, look at Cedric. I don't think he was ready to retire.
Right. Right.
You know, I don't think mentally he was ready, but his body obviously said, yeah, you are.
You got to know when to walk away. You got to know when to walk away, and you've got to leave your ego.
I mean, Sean was almost 50 years old too. I mean,
Up to 300 pounds almost.
What's crazy is you take a look at the. I remember when I started being interested in bodybuilding, Brandon Curry was supposed to be the next guy. Where they were like, man, this guy. And then it kind of fell off, and he disappeared for years, and then he went to Kuwait, and now he's, you know, Mr. Olympia, and it comes down to like, man, this guy's career was essentially over, and he came back out of nowhere and became one of the best guys in the world. That's a dangerous precedence to set then, man, because like you said, if you were kind of like, well, I guess the bus passed me, man, and I didn't get on. And then another bus comes by, and you're like, even if I have to run next to it, I'm going to get on that bus.
Well, if you have when you look at how Brandon looked when he was younger, when he won his amateur titles, I mean, there's clearly an amazing genetics. I mean, it has some things happens in life. It doesn't really mean everybody who is not successful at all time has to retire, you know. But there are moments. For example, when you look at Tom Platz, I loved first time he didn't qualify for the Olympia. He placed, I think, 4th in a show in Florida. Top 3 qualified. Quinn was 3rd. That's it. I tried. I can't qualify for the big event anymore. Let me do something else. And look how he looks today. He's looking great. Yeah,
which is really funny because Ronnie Coleman's story is very different, right? Where he told his girlfriend, I don't think I'm very good at this bodybuilding thing, man. I think I'm going to quit. And then his girlfriend goes, no, you're not. And he goes, yeah, you're probably right. And then he kept going.
Yeah. I think Lee Haney was the same way, right? Lee Haney's wife pushed him to compete.
Yeah, exactly.
Last time. The eighth time.
And you know, Ronnie is never a good example for anything. He's this like one guy who won the lottery, or, you know, I mean, he's just like 1 in a million. Yeah. But for most people who are not qualifying for the Olympia, I mean, it will not happen in the future. And Ronnie was, I mean, often he was very good. He just didn't dial in right. When you, for example, look in 97, when he only placed 9th, when you look at the Olympia, the video made before the Olympia, he was great. You know, he won shows before. He won shows in Toronto. He was, I remember when he beat Flex Wheeler. I mean, he was always great.
Yeah.
You know, it just didn't quite put it together.
Yeah.
Very true. Well, cool. Brandon, I don't have anything else for you unless you guys got something else for me. We've been going at it for a while. So definitely have to have you on again.
Hey, anytime, man. Listen, I don't get the chance to normally when I'm on podcasts, people ask me about like my experience in bodybuilding or something. Like when it comes down to talking to other professionals and other people who have you know, decades worth of experience and situations that may or may not mirror things that are happening today, or the reason why certain things aren't happening today. You know, as soon as I go downstairs, because we put our kids to sleep, and then I came up here and did this podcast. I can't wait to tell this is probably my favorite thing I've ever done in terms of you know, talking to somebody about bodybuilding. Just a forum conversation with a lot of well-intentioned and educated professionals. So for whatever purpose and whatever facet you ever want me to come back, I said I'll always have an open yes whenever you need me.
Awesome. Yeah, I'd love that.
Yeah, great.
Pleasure speaking to you, Brandon.
Yeah, you too.
Great guest. Yeah.
All right, gentlemen. John, everybody, thanks again.
All right. Thanks, guys.
All right, guys.
Guys.
All right. Have a good
Next
evening.
week.